A divorced mom inherited a worthless bunker, but the moment she opened the rusted door, her dog refused to leave it alone. What looked like nothing more than concrete and dust was hiding something buried for decades. Old photographs. A child's toy soldier. Letters written to a son who was never supposed to be found. The deeper she searched, the stranger it got, because the boy in those photos looked just like her. Her entire life was about to be flipped upside down, as family secrets, sacrifice, and forgotten promises came clawing back to the surface. What was her uncle hiding down there? Who was the child everyone tried to erase? And when the truth finally comes out, will it heal generations of pain, or tear her new family apart forever? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The gray clouds hung low over the hills like a heavy blanket, matching Naomi Matthews' mood as she guided her weathered SUV up the narrow dirt road. Chunks of gravel pinged against the undercarriage, and beside her, Scout's golden fur caught what little light filtered through the windshield. His warm brown eyes watched the passing landscape, his breath fogging up the passenger window. "This is probably a waste of time, buddy," Naomi said, reaching over to scratch behind Scout's ears. The golden retriever leaned into her touch, but his attention remained fixed on something outside. The letter from her uncle's lawyer had been specific about the property's location, though Naomi hadn't expected it to be quite so remote. Weeds pushed through cracks in what remained of the old pavement, and thorny bushes crowded the edges of the road. She hadn't spoken to her uncle in years before his death, their relationship fractured by old hurts and misunderstandings. Now, all she had left of him was this mysterious piece of land he'd willed to her. The SUV lurched over a particularly deep rut, and Naomi gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Sorry, Scout." She slowed down, picking her way more carefully along the deteriorating road. Her dog's tail thumped against the seat, seemingly unbothered by the bumpy ride. Finally, the road opened into what might have once been a clearing. Naomi parked and cut the engine, listening to it tick as it cooled. The silence that followed felt heavy, broken only by Scout's excited whine. Okay, she said, reaching for his leash. "Let's see what Uncle left us." The moment she opened the door, the damp spring air wrapped around her like a cold cloth. Naomi zipped up her jacket and helped Scout out of the vehicle. The ground was soft under her boots, years of fallen leaves creating a spongy carpet beneath the new grass and weeds. Naomi pulled out her phone, checking the property details one more time. "It should be right around here somewhere," she muttered, turning in a slow circle. Scout tugged at his leash, nose to the ground and tail wagging with purpose. Then she saw it, a concrete structure set into the hillside, almost completely hidden by overgrown vegetation. The entrance reminded her of old World War II bunkers she'd seen in history books, with its heavy door and utilitarian design. "What in the world?" Naomi whispered, picking her way carefully toward it. Scout suddenly tensed beside her, a low growl rumbling in his throat. The sound stopped her in her tracks. Scout rarely growled at anything. "What is it, boy?" She scanned the area but saw nothing threatening. Scout pulled harder on the leash, not backing away from the bunker but straining toward it. His behavior was odd, urgent but not fearful. Naomi approached the door cautiously. Rust had claimed most of the metal parts, creating abstract patterns of orange and brown across its surface. Thick vines had wound their way around the frame, as if nature was trying to reclaim this man-made intrusion. "This has to be worthless," she said, more to worthless herself than Scout. "Just an old storage bunker or something." But why would her uncle leave it to her specifically? Their estrangement had been long and painful. Surely there was more to this than a worthless piece of land with a deteriorating bunker. Scout's continued pulling drew her closer to the entrance. Naomi ran her hand along the door's edge, feeling the rough texture of decades of corrosion. The handle was stiff, refusing to budge at first. She put her weight into it, grunting with effort, and suddenly it gave way with a screech of protesting metal. A burst of stale air rushed out, carrying with it the musty smell of long-closed spaces. Naomi coughed, waving her hand in front of her face. Scout's excitement grew, his nails clicking on the concrete as he danced in place, trying to get closer to the dark opening. "Hold on," Naomi said, fishing in her jacket pocket for her flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a metal ladder descending into the unknown. The light caught motes of dust swirling in the air, disturbed for the first time in who knew how long. Scout scratched at the floor near the ladder, his claws making sharp sounds against the concrete. The noise echoed down into the darkness below, suggesting a significant space underneath. Naomi's heart began to pound as she directed the flashlight beam downward, trying to see the bottom of the shaft. The ladder disappeared into blackness, its metal rungs stained with rust but seemingly intact. Scout's insistence and her uncle's strange bequest tugged at her curiosity, even as her common sense warned her about entering unknown underground spaces alone. She stood there, flashlight beam trembling slightly in her grip, as Scout continued his determined scratching. The darkness below seemed to wait, holding secrets her uncle had deemed important enough to pass on to her, despite their years of silence. Whatever lay at the bottom of that ladder, Naomi realized, might hold answers to questions she hadn't even known to ask. Her heart thundered in her chest as she contemplated taking that first step down. The musty air carried hints of metal and concrete, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Scout's excitement was contagious, but it was the memory of her uncle, and all the words left unsaid between them, that made her grip the flashlight tighter and move closer to the edge. The morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Naomi's SUV once again crunched up the overgrown driveway. The early spring air felt crisp and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and new growth. Scout pressed his nose against the passenger window, his breath creating small, foggy patches on the glass. This time, Naomi came prepared. A canvas bag sat in the back seat, packed with work gloves, a battery-powered lantern, several bottles of water, and a few protein bars. She'd barely slept the night before, her mind racing with questions about what lay beneath that rusted door. "Ready for an adventure, boy?" she asked, pulling on her thick work gloves. Scout's tail wagged furiously in response, his whole body vibrating with excitement. The leather of the gloves felt stiff and new against her fingers as she gathered her supplies. The bunker's entrance looked no less intimidating in the morning light. If anything, the shadows seemed deeper, more mysterious. Naomi set her equipment down and pulled the heavy door open again, wincing at the metallic screech that broke the morning quiet. Scout immediately began barking, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. His stance was alert but not aggressive, more anxious than anything else. Naomi understood the feeling. Every rational part of her mind suggested leaving this place alone, yet something stronger pulled her forward. "It's okay, Scout. Stay up here for now." Naomi clicked on the lantern, its bright LED beam cutting through the darkness below. She tested the first rung of the ladder with her foot, applying pressure gradually. Despite the rust, it held firm. Taking a deep breath, she began her descent. The metal rungs felt cold through her gloves, and a fine dust coated everything. Each step brought her deeper into the earth, the morning light above growing more distant. Scout's anxious barks followed her down, reverberating against the concrete walls. The ladder stretched for about 15 feet before Naomi's boots touched solid ground. She swept the lantern beam around, taking in her surroundings. The space was larger than she'd expected, maybe 20 feet square, with a ceiling high enough to stand comfortably. Metal shelves lined 3 of the walls, their surfaces thick with dust and rust. Wooden crates sat stacked in corners, their contents hidden behind rotted boards. A few had split open, revealing ancient canned goods, with labels so faded they were unreadable. "Well, Uncle," she muttered, "what was so important about this place?" Her voice sounded flat in the enclosed space, absorbed by the dirt and concrete. A sudden scrambling noise made her jump. Scout had apparently decided he wasn't staying topside after all. Before she could stop him, he bounded down the ladder with surprising agility, landing beside her with a soft thud. "Scout, you crazy dog!" But her scolding held no real anger. Having him beside her made the underground space feel less oppressive. The golden retriever shook himself, then immediately began exploring, his nose working overtime as he investigated every corner. Naomi started her own systematic examination of the bunker. The shelves held various supplies, old radio equipment, tools, and more canned goods, all in various states of decay. Everything looked like it dated back decades, gathering dust, while the world above changed. She was examining a particularly interesting piece of old equipment when Scout's behavior suddenly changed. He rushed to a section of the dirt wall between 2 metal shelving units, pawing at it frantically. His claws sent small cascades of soil to the floor. "Hey, what did you find?" Naomi moved closer, shining her lantern on the spot. The wall there looked no different from any other section, just packed earth with occasional rocks embedded in it. But Scout's excitement was unmistakable. Following some instinct, Naomi reached out and knocked on the wall. The sound that came back made her freeze. Instead of the dull thud she expected from solid earth, she heard something hollow, something that suggested space or metal behind the dirt. Her heart began to race. She knocked again, moving her hand across the wall. The hollow sound was distinct and localized to one specific area, about 2 feet square. Scout continued pawing at the spot, looking back at her with eager eyes. Removing her gloves, Naomi ran her fingers over the packed earth. Now that she was paying closer attention, she could feel subtle differences in texture. This section seemed looser somehow, less compacted than the surrounding wall. She began carefully pulling away the soil, letting it fall to the floor in clumps. Scout helped in his own way, scratching at the lower portion. As they worked, something began to emerge from behind the dirt, something distinctly not natural. Metal glinted in the lantern light as more soil fell away. Naomi's breath caught in her throat as she revealed the edge of what appeared to be some kind of container. It was wedged into the wall, deliberately hidden behind a facade of earth. The discovery sent her mind racing. This wasn't just random storage, this was something her uncle had intentionally concealed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she cleared more dirt away, revealing more of the mysterious container's surface. Scout's tail wagged faster, his earlier anxiety transformed into pure excitement. The metal box gradually emerged from its earthen hiding place, its presence raising more questions than answers. Whatever secrets her uncle had kept, whatever he'd wanted her to find, it seemed Scout's instincts had led them right to it. Naomi's heart pounded as she continued to work, every new inch of revealed metal adding to the mystery of what lay hidden in these underground walls. The metal container refused to budge at first, stuck fast in its earthen prison. Naomi braced her feet against the wall, fingers gripping the edge she'd uncovered. With a grunt of effort, she pulled hard, and suddenly the box came free, sending her stumbling backward. Scout jumped out of the way as she regained her balance. "Let's see what we've got here," Naomi muttered, dragging the container to the center of the bunker where the lantern light was strongest. It was about the size of a small suitcase, made of sturdy steel that had somehow resisted rust despite decades in the damp earth. A simple latch held it closed, no lock in sight. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked the latch free. The lid creaked open on stiff hinges, releasing a whiff of old paper and something else, maybe leather or oil. Inside, several bundles wrapped in oilcloth lay neatly arranged, their shapes suggesting books or notebooks beneath the protective covering. Naomi carefully lifted out the first bundle, unwrapping it slowly. The oilcloth had done its job well. The leather-bound journal inside looked almost new, though the pages had yellowed with age. Her uncle's familiar handwriting filled the pages, the ink still clear and readable. Scout settled beside her, his warm presence reassuring as she set the journal aside and reached for another bundle. This one contained photographs, dozens of them, preserved between sheets of wax paper. They were old color prints from the 1960s, the kind with scalloped edges and slightly faded hues. As she leafed through the stack, her breath suddenly caught. One photo showed a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing in what looked like a backyard. He was grinning at the camera, proudly holding up a toy soldier, but it was the woman standing next to him that made Naomi's heart skip a beat. The dark-haired woman could have been Naomi's twin. The same high cheekbones, the same slight tilt to her eyes, even the way she smiled. It was like looking in a mirror, except for the 1960s dress and hairstyle. Scout whined softly, pressing against her leg as if sensing her shock. With shaking hands, Naomi set the photo aside and unwrapped the final bundle. Inside was the toy soldier, the exact same one from the photograph. The small figure was made of metal, hand-painted in faded green and brown. One arm was raised as if leading a charge, the other holding a tiny rifle. "Who were they?" Naomi whispered, looking back at the photograph. The boy's face seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Was he someone her uncle had known? And the woman, could she be a relative Naomi had never heard about? The resemblance was too strong to be coincidence. She spent the next several hours going through the journals and photos, trying to piece together their significance. The journals contained daily entries spanning several years, but they raised more questions than they answered. Her uncle's writings were often cryptic, full of references to people and events she didn't recognize. As the afternoon wore on, shadows lengthened in the bunker's entrance above. Scout had dozed off beside her, but occasionally twitched and whimpered in his sleep. Naomi gathered the photos and journals, carefully rewrapping them in their oilcloth coverings. The toy soldier, though, she couldn't bring herself to wrap away again. Standing, she placed it on one of the metal shelves, where the lantern light caught its worn details. The small figure seemed to stand at attention, guarding its secrets. Through the bunker's entrance, she could see the sky darkening toward dusk. Naomi stood there, staring at the toy soldier as questions tumbled through her mind. Who was that little boy from so long ago? Why had her uncle hidden these things away so carefully? And most troubling of all, who was the woman who could have been her double, captured in a photograph decades before Naomi was born? Scout stirred and sat up, watching her with concerned brown eyes as she continued to gaze at the mysterious toy. The growing darkness seemed to make the bunker's silence heavier, more meaningful, as if the walls themselves held answers they weren't ready to share. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Naomi Parallel parked in front of Dale's Diner, the worn leather folder of photographs tucked under her arm. Scout watched forlornly from the car as she headed inside, the bell above the door announcing her arrival with a cheerful ring. The diner buzzed with the usual breakfast crowd, farmers drinking coffee before heading to their fields, retirees lingering over their eggs and toast. The vinyl booth squeaked as Naomi slid into an empty one, ordering coffee from Sally, the waitress who'd been serving there since Naomi was a kid. "Hey folks," Naomi called out to the regulars at the counter. "Mind if I show you something?" She spread the photographs across the Formica tabletop, the morning light making the faded colors seem even more distant in time. Old Jim Peters squinted at them through his thick glasses. "Well, ain't that something? Must be from back in the 60s, judging by them clothes. Look at that little boy with his toy soldier." Martha Wilson chuckled, adjusting her hearing aid. "Could be any of our kids back then. We all had crew cuts like that." But when Mr. Granger shuffled over from his usual corner booth, the mood shifted. His weathered face went ashen as he stared at the photos, coffee cup trembling in his gnarled hands. "Where did you get these?" he demanded, voice rough with emotion. "They were in my uncle's bunker," Naomi explained. "I'm trying to figure out who—" "Leave it be, Mr. Granger cut her off sharply. "Some things are better left in the past. Some secrets." He shook his head, spilling coffee as he set his cup down too hard. "Just leave it be, girl." Before Naomi could press him further, he hurried out of the diner, leaving his breakfast half-eaten. The other patrons exchanged uncomfortable glances and quickly found reasons to look away from the photographs. That afternoon, Naomi returned to the bunker, determination burning in her chest. Scout bounded down the ladder ahead of her, his tail wagging with excitement. She settled onto an old crate, lantern light pooling around her as she opened the first journal. Her uncle's familiar handwriting filled page after page, telling a story she'd never imagined. "Found them huddled in the rain," one entry began. "Mother and child, desperate. Couldn't turn them away. The boy clutches that toy soldier like it's his only friend in the world. Maybe it is." More entries followed, painting a picture of secret meals shared, whispered conversations, and constant fear of discovery. "They can't stay in town," her uncle had written. "Too many questions, too dangerous. The bunker is secure, at least. We'll make it work." Scout's sudden barking startled Naomi from her reading. He was scratching frantically at a spot near the back wall, dirt flying from his paws. Setting aside the journal, she moved closer with the lantern. "What is it, boy?" The dog's digging had revealed something metallic glinting in the packed earth. Naomi grabbed a rusty trowel from the shelves and began carefully excavating around the object. Within minutes, she had uncovered another hidden compartment, smaller than the first. Inside lay a battered lockbox, its dark metal surface pitted with age. It was surprisingly heavy as she lifted it out. The key was missing, but the lock had corroded enough that she could work it open with a screwdriver from her car. The lid creaked open to reveal a collection of military medals nestled in faded velvet, bronze stars, campaign ribbons, and dafur. Other decorations she didn't recognize. Beneath them was a stack of letters, their envelopes yellowed but still sealed. Each one bore the same inscription in elegant handwriting: "To my son, someday." Hours later, Naomi sat at her kitchen table, the lockbox open before her. Outside, crickets chirped in the darkness as the kitchen clock ticked past midnight. Scout lay pressed against her legs, his head heavy on her lap, offering silent comfort. She ran her fingers over the sealed letters, heart aching at the thought of messages written but never delivered. The medals gleamed dully in the kitchen light, each one representing unknown acts of courage and sacrifice. "Who are you?" she whispered to the contents of the box, as if they might somehow answer. Scout whined softly and nuzzled closer, while the quiet house held no answers to the mysteries that seemed to grow deeper with each discovery. The morning sun cast long shadows across Naomi's kitchen counter as she carefully sealed the envelope. Inside was a small plastic bag containing several strands of dark hair she'd found tucked into the military medals box. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed down the flap, second-guessing herself. "This is crazy," she muttered to Scout, who watched her with his head tilted. "What are the chances this will actually lead anywhere?" But she couldn't shake the pull of possibility. That resemblance between herself and the woman in the old photograph was too striking to ignore. After researching DNA ancestry services late into the night, she'd chosen one that specialized in family connections. At the post office, Martha Wilson was behind the counter as usual. "Priority mail?" she asked, eyeing the envelope. "Yes, please." Naomi tried to angle the package so Martha couldn't read the DNA lab's address. The last thing she needed was more small-town gossip about her uncle's mysteries. Back in her car, Naomi pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd found in the local Historical Society's directory. After 3 rings, a warm voice answered. "Dr. Hayes speaking." "Hi, Dr. Hayes. This is Naomi Matthews. I'm wondering if you might have time to look at something unusual I've found." There was a pause. "The old bunker out on Ridge Road? I heard you'd inherited that property." "News travels fast," Naomi said with a wry smile. Small towns, Dr. Hayes chuckled. I'd be happy to take a look. Historical preservation is my passion, especially the overlooked stories. When would you like to meet? They arranged to meet that afternoon. As Naomi drove up the dirt road to the bunker, she spotted an older model Subaru already parked near the entrance. Dr. Evelyn Hayes stood waiting, her silver hair neat despite the breeze, wearing practical hiking boots with her slacks and sweater. Call me Evelyn, she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp and interested behind wire-rimmed glasses. I've always wondered about this place. Your uncle was protective of his privacy. That's putting it mildly, Naomi agreed, leading the way to the bunker entrance. Scout bounded ahead, his tail wagging in greeting. The heavy door creaked open, releasing its familiar musty breath. Naomi switched on her lantern, illuminating the steep ladder. It's a bit of a climb down, but worth it. I may be retired, but I'm not delicate, Evelyn said with a grin, following Naomi down with surprising agility. Once inside, Evelyn moved slowly around the space, taking in every detail. Her fingers traced the metal shelving, examined the construction of the walls. This wasn't just thrown together, she murmured. Your uncle put real thought into this place. Naomi spread out the photographs and journals on a makeshift table. I found these hidden in the walls. Along with these. She set out the military medals and unopened letters. Evelyn leaned close, studying the images. Her breath caught at the photograph of the woman and boy. Oh my, she whispered. What is it? Naomi asked. Do you recognize them? Not specifically, but... Evelyn straightened, her expression thoughtful. The early 1960s were a complicated time. There were people, refugees, really, fleeing persecution, trying to build new lives. Some of them had to disappear completely. She picked up one of the journals, scanning the entries. Your uncle mentions them arriving in the rain, the mother and child, needing shelter, protection. She looked up at Naomi. This fits a pattern I've studied. There were networks of people who helped others vanish, start fresh. Safe houses, new identities. But why would they need to hide? Naomi asked, feeling a chill despite the warm afternoon. Many reasons: political persecution, religious differences, family situations gone dangerous. Evelyn's voice was gentle. Sometimes the only way to survive was to leave everything behind, including their names. Scout whined softly, pressing against Naomi's legs. She reached down to scratch his ears, trying to steady herself. So my uncle, he was helping them hide? It appears so, and he did a thorough job. There's no mention of names or origins in these journals. He was protecting them even in his private writings. Evelyn carefully set down the journal. Your uncle understood the stakes. One slip, one wrong word to the wrong person. They spent the next few hours going through the materials. Evelyn's trained eye picked up details Naomi had missed. The European make of the toy soldier, certain phrases in the journals that hinted at specific regions and time periods. The medals are interesting, Evelyn noted, examining them carefully. These aren't American military decorations. The design suggests Eastern European, possibly related to resistance movements during World War II. The sun was setting by the time they packed everything away, casting long shadows through the bunker's entrance. As they climbed back up to the surface, Naomi felt overwhelmed by the weight of what they'd discovered, and what might still be revealed. The DNA test, she said quietly, more to herself than Evelyn. I sent it this morning. Hair I found with the medals. Evelyn paused, her expression serious in the fading light. That could change everything, you know. Are you prepared for what you might learn? Naomi looked back at the bunker entrance, thinking of all the secrets it had held for so many years. A mix of dread and anticipation swirled in her chest. The DNA results could unravel mysteries she'd never known existed in her family, or lead nowhere at all. Scout pressed close, as if sensing her uncertainty. Above them, the sky was painted in deep purples and oranges, a reminder that some things remained constant, while others changed forever. Naomi's phone chimed while she was making her morning coffee. Scout lifted his head from his bed in the corner, watching as she tapped the screen to open her email. The Ancestry Service logo appeared, along with the subject line. Your DNA results are ready. Her hand trembled slightly as she set down her coffee mug. For a moment, she just stared at the notification, her heart beating faster. Then, taking a deep breath, she clicked to open the report. The first few paragraphs were standard information about genetic markers and geographical origins, but halfway through, her eyes locked onto a section titled Close Family Matches. There, in clear black text, was an unmistakable connection. The DNA from the hair sample showed a direct family relationship to her own DNA. Oh my God, she whispered, gripping the edge of the counter. Scout patted over, sensing her distress. The report continued with scientific certainty. The child from the bunker, the little boy in the photographs, was family. The genetic markers suggested a first-degree relationship. This wasn't some distant cousin, but someone much closer. Her hands shaking, Naomi connected her printer and hit print. She needed this to be real, tangible, not just words on a screen. As the printer hummed to life, she paced her small kitchen, running her fingers through her hair. "This changes everything," she murmured to Scout, who watched her with concerned brown eyes. The photograph of the little boy holding the toy soldier flashed in her mind. All this time, he had been family, her family. Unable to stay still, Naomi grabbed her car keys. Scout's ears perked up hopefully, but she shook her head. "Not this time, buddy. I need to think." She collected the warm papers from the printer, climbed into her SUV, and started driving with no particular destination in mind. The morning sun cast long shadows across the road as she wound through the countryside, her mind racing with questions. Who was this boy, Isaac? How was he related to her? And why had her uncle never mentioned him? After nearly an hour of aimless driving, Naomi pulled over onto a gravel shoulder overlooking a valley. The scientific proof in black and white felt heavy in her hands. Tears began to fall, slowly at first, then in great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the little boy in the photograph, for his mother who lived in fear, for her uncle who carried these secrets to his grave. She cried for all the years of not knowing, of feeling disconnected from her own family history. When the tears finally subsided, her head ached and her eyes felt puffy, but something inside her felt clearer. The sun was setting by the time Naomi returned home. Scout greeted her with worried whines and gentle nudges until she hugged him close. "I'm okay, boy." "Really?" She made herself a cup of tea and settled into her favorite reading chair, the stack of journals from the bunker spread across her lap. With new understanding, she began to reread them, catching details she'd missed before. Her uncle's writings painted a picture of a desperate time. The woman, Isaac's mother, lived in constant fear of deportation. There were mentions of late-night conversations where she confided her terror of being sent back, of what might happen to her son if they were discovered. "She asked me again today if I'm certain they're safe here," one entry read. "I assured her no one knows about the bunker, that I'll protect them both. The boy draws pictures to pass the time, soldiers and houses and sunny skies, such hope in those crayon marks." Scout's sudden bark startled Naomi from her reading. He was pawing at something near the bunker's far wall, a corner she hadn't fully explored. Setting aside the journals, she grabbed her flashlight and knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" Scout's paw scraped at the packed earth, revealing something metallic. Naomi began to dig with her hands, soon uncovering the distinct shape of an old tin lunchbox, the kind schoolchildren once carried. It was rusted but intact, decorated with faded images of cowboys and horses. With trembling fingers, she worked the clasp open. Inside, protected from moisture by the tight seal, were dozens of crayon drawings on yellowed paper. Her breath caught as she gently lifted them out one by one. A house with a red roof and yellow sundae. Stick figures holding hands. A tall man, a woman with dark hair, and a small boy. A soldier in green standing guard. Each picture was signed in careful, childish letters. Isaac. The name hit her like a physical force. This was real. This little boy who drew pictures in a hidden bunker, who signed his name with such care, he was connected to her by blood. Naomi held the lunchbox close to her chest, feeling its weight, its history. "Isaac," she whispered, tasting the name on her tongue for the first time. The sound hung in the air, making real what had only been words in journals before. Scout pressed against her leg, offering comfort as always. In the quiet of the bunker, surrounded by these precious remnants of a hidden past, Naomi felt a deep sense of kinship with the boy who had drawn these pictures. Whatever their exact relationship, they were bound together by more than just DNA. They were bound by this place, these secrets, and the love of those who had worked so hard to protect them both. Naomi's fingers hovered over her phone, hesitating before dialing the number she'd found in her uncle's old address book. Captain James Donnelly had been her uncle's closest friend during their service years, but they'd lost touch decades ago. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. "Donnelly here." "Captain Donnelly, this is Naomi Matthews. I'm calling about my uncle, John's niece." His voice softened slightly. "I heard about his passing. Good man, your uncle, one of the best I served with." Naomi took a deep breath. "I need to ask you about something that happened in the 1960s, about a woman and her son who stayed in his bunker." The line went so quiet she thought the call had dropped. Finally, Donnelly spoke, his voice heavy. "You found them out, did you? Should have known John would leave something behind. Please, I need to understand. The boy Isaac, he's family somehow. I did a DNA test." Donnelly sighed deeply. "Your uncle, he did what was right, not what was ordered. That's the kind of man he was." What do you mean? Back then, there were officials who didn't want certain refugees staying in the country. They'd find ways to make them disappear. Deportation, mostly. But sometimes worse. Donnelly's voice grew thick with emotion. John wouldn't stand for it. When that woman and her boy needed shelter, he didn't hesitate. But there were consequences. There were threats. Anonymous calls, mysterious cars parked outside his house. Some higher-ups made it clear they knew what he was doing and wanted it stopped. But John, he just dug in deeper. Made that bunker practically invisible. Scout whined from his spot near Naomi's feet, sensing her distress as she processed this information. Why didn't he, Demian? Ever tell me? Protection, probably. The less anyone knew, the safer everyone was. I should have helped him more. Donnelly's voice cracked slightly. Been carrying that guilt a long time. You're helping now, Naomi assured him. Do you know what happened to them? To Isaac and his mother? John never said. One day, they were just gone. He wouldn't talk about it, not even to me. But he kept watching over that bunker like it held gold. Now I know why. He was protecting their story. After thanking Donnelly, Naomi sat in silence for a long while, scratching behind Scout's ears. Her uncle had risked everything to protect them. But from what? She needed more answers. The county courthouse was a stern brick building that smelled of dust and old paper. Naomi signed in at the front desk, explaining she was doing family research. The clerk directed her to the archives in the basement. Row after row of metal shelving held leather-bound volumes and cardboard boxes. Naomi started with immigration records from the 1960s, pulling heavy books onto a wooden table. Scout settled at her feet as she began to search. The first signs of tampering were subtle, a page number skipped here, a name partially blacked out there. But as she dug deeper into records from the specific months mentioned in her uncle's journals, the manipulation became obvious. Entire pages had been cleanly removed, leaving only paper stubs in the bindings. Names were crossed out with thick black marker, making them impossible to read. In the housing records, whole sections appeared to have been rewritten, with different handwriting and newer ink. This is systematic, Naomi muttered to herself, spreading out the altered documents. Someone went through every record that might mention them and just erased them. She found a marriage certificate from 1963 with the bride's name completely blacked out. A school enrollment list had 3 lines neatly cut away. Property records showed mysterious gaps in the dates that aligned perfectly with the time period she was investigating. Even the local newspaper archives had been sanitized. Issues from key dates were missing, and in the ones that remained, articles had been carefully clipped out, leaving rectangular holes in the yellowed pages. Scout's head suddenly lifted, his ears perking up at the sound of footsteps. An elderly clerk appeared between the shelves, pushing a cart of books. Finding everything all right? She asked, her voice echoing in the quiet space. Actually, I'm noticing some inconsistencies in these records, Naomi said carefully. Quite a few missing pages and redacted names. Was there some kind of official review of these documents? The clerk's friendly smile faded slightly. Oh, that was before my time. Government work, they said. Something about standardizing the files. She hurried away with her cart, wheels squeaking on the linoleum floor. Naomi turned back to the mutilated records, anger building in her chest. This wasn't standardization, this was deliberate erasure. Someone had gone to enormous effort to hide all traces of Isaac and his mother, to make it as if they had never existed. The afternoon light filtering through the high basement windows grew dim as Naomi continued searching, growing increasingly frustrated with each doctored document she discovered. Scout dozed at her feet, occasionally lifting his head when her sighs of annoyance grew too loud. Finally, after hours of finding nothing but carefully crafted gaps in history, Naomi slammed shut a particularly mangled record book. A cloud of dust puffed up, making her cough. What are they hiding? She whispered fiercely to herself, her voice barely audible in the empty archive. The question seemed to hang in the musty air, as heavy as the secrets buried in these altered pages. She gathered her notes, which were mostly lists of what was missing rather than what she'd found. Every dead end and deleted name only made her more determined to uncover the truth. Someone had worked very hard to keep this story buried, but they hadn't counted on her uncle preserving the evidence, or on her refusing to let it stay hidden. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight, but Naomi couldn't even think about sleep. Her mind raced with questions about the altered records, about her uncle's role, about Isaac and his mother. Scout's warm presence beside her chair offered silent comfort as she spread the contents of the hidden container across her dining room table. Under the soft glow of her pendant lamp, she arranged the items carefully, the faded photographs showing the dark-haired woman and young Isaac, the crayon drawings from the lunchbox, and finally, the stack of letters bound with a faded blue ribbon. Her hands trembled slightly as she untied the delicate knot. "What else were you trying to tell us?" she whispered, smoothing out the first letter. The paper was thin and brittle, threatening to crack at the creases. Most of the envelopes were sealed, marked with dates and, "To my son, someday," in careful handwriting. But one envelope caught her eye. It was unsealed, the flap merely tucked in. Scout's tail thumped steadily against the hardwood floor as Naomi gently extracted the letter. The handwriting here was different, rushed, almost frantic, unlike the measured script on the envelopes. Her heart began to beat faster as she read, "My dearest friend, they're closing in. We can't stay here any longer, though leaving breaks my heart. You've risked everything to protect us, and we will never forget your kindness. The tunnels you showed us through the forest might be our only chance now. Isaac is scared but brave, just like his father was. I've taught him to be quiet, to move carefully. We'll try for the border crossing you marked on the map." Naomi's hands shook as she turned the page over. In the margin was a roughly sketched map, showing winding paths through what appeared to be densely wooded areas. Small X's marked what might be checkpoints or safe houses. The ink had faded, but she could make out dotted lines suggesting underground passages or hidden trails. She grabbed her reading glasses for a closer look, leaning in under the light. Notes in tiny writing bordered the map. "Third oak past the split rock, and watch for the red ribbons." These weren't random marks. This was an escape route, carefully planned and memorized. Scout shifted position, resting his head on her lap. Naomi absently scratched behind his ears while studying the letter more closely. The paper held other clues: water stains, smudged ink, a small tear hastily mended with tape now turned yellow with age. This letter had been through something, just like its writer. She reached for the stack of photographs again, examining them with new eyes. In one, Isaac stood proudly holding his toy soldier, but now she noticed details she'd missed before: his mother's hand gripping his shoulder just a little too tightly, the worried crease between her brows, despite her smile. They knew they weren't safe. Even then, the clock struck 2 o'clock, its chime echoing in the quiet house. Scout lifted his head, ears perking up at the sound, then settled back down. Naomi barely noticed, lost in her examination of the evidence before her. She began arranging the letters by date, creating a timeline of increasing urgency and fear. Her uncle's journal entries filled in more gaps. He'd written about marking trees, checking weather reports, timing guard rotations, every detail meticulously planned for their escape. But he'd never written about whether they made it or not. Maybe he couldn't risk leaving that information where it might be found. "But you wouldn't have helped them plan all this if you didn't think they had a chance," Naomi said aloud to her uncle's memory. Scout's tail thumped in agreement. The night deepened around her as she pored over the documents. Again and again, the map's details began to blur before her tired eyes, but she couldn't stop looking. Somewhere in these papers was the truth about what happened to Isaac and his mother. She picked up one of Isaac's crayon drawings, a bright yellow sun over stick figures holding hands. On the back, in a child's wobbly writing, "For Uncle John, thank you for the stories." Her uncle had been more than just a protector to them. He'd given them hope, comfort, maybe even moments of joy in their hiding. Outside her kitchen window, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. Scout stood up and stretched, ready for his morning routine, but Naomi barely noticed. The unsealed letter lay in front of her, its desperate words and hopeful map telling a story of courage she was only beginning to understand. Her throat felt tight as she touched the faded ink of the map one more time. "In the growing light of morning," she whispered. "Isaac, you made it out, didn't you?" Her fingers gripped the letter like a lifeline, this tangible piece of their story, as the sun's first rays filtered through her kitchen curtains. Naomi stared at her laptop screen, the familiar blue and green logo of AncestryLink glowing back at her. Her DNA results had been sitting in her account for days, but now she was ready to take the next step. With Scout curled up at her feet, she clicked the button to upload her genetic profile to the relative matching database. "Well, buddy," she said to Scout, who lifted his head at the sound of her voice, "I guess we wait and see who's out there." The next 7 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Naomi checked her email obsessively, jumping every time her phone buzzed. She tried to keep busy, organizing the bunker materials and rereading the journals, but her mind kept drifting to possibilities. What if Isaac was still alive? What if he had a family of his own now? On the 7th day, while she was stirring her morning coffee, her phone chimed with a notification. Scout, who had been dozing in the morning sunlight, perked up his ears as Naomi gasped. "DNA match alert, close relative found," the message read. Her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold her phone, Naomi clicked through to her AncestryLink account. There it was, a match with a 98% confidence rating. The profile name read Isaac Cohen, age 63. "Isaac Cohen," she whispered, the name feeling strange and familiar all at once. Scout patted over and pressed against her leg, sensing her emotional state. She sank into her kitchen chair, overwhelmed by the reality that the little boy from the photographs was not only alive but findable. Hours ticked by as Naomi sat at her desk, typing and deleting draft after draft of a message to Isaac. How do you introduce yourself to someone whose childhood toys you found in a hidden bunker? What do you say to a lost relative who might not even know he was lost? Scout wandered in and out of her study, bringing her toys as if trying to distract her from her anxiety. Finally, as afternoon shadows lengthened across her desk, she took a deep breath and began to write from her heart. Dear Mr. Cohen, my name is Naomi Matthews. I believe we're related through circumstances that might surprise you. Recently, I inherited a property from my uncle that contained an underground bunker. Inside, I found photographs, journals, and personal items from the early 1960s, including a toy soldier that belonged to a little boy named Isaac. The journals tell a story of my uncle helping a mother and her young son who were in hiding. There were letters, too, and drawings signed by Isaac. Through DNA testing, I've discovered that we share a close genetic connection. I know this must seem incredible, maybe even unsettling, but I have all the original materials here, the photographs, the journals, even your toy soldier. I've spent weeks piecing together this story, trying to understand what happened and why my uncle kept these secrets. If you're willing, I'd very much like to share what I've found with you. These aren't just historical artifacts to me anymore. They're pieces of a family story I never knew I had. I understand if you need time to process this information, or if you'd prefer not to respond at all, but if you'd like to know more, I'm here. Sincerely, Naomi Matthews. Her cursor hovered over the send button for what felt like hours. Scout rested his chin on her knee, his warm brown eyes looking up at her supportively. The weight of history, of lives disrupted and secrets kept, seemed to press down on her shoulders. What do you think, Scout? She asked softly. Should we send it? Scout's tail thumped against the floor once, twice. Naomi closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and clicked, send. The message disappeared into cyberspace, carrying with it all her hopes and fears. She pushed back from her desk, suddenly unable to sit still. She paced her house, straightening pictures that didn't need straightening, reorganizing books on shelves, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning with possibilities. Scout followed her from room to room, his presence steady and comforting. As evening approached, she found herself sitting by her phone, willing it to show a new message. The waiting felt like being in that bunker again, dark, uncertain, full of questions without answers. Minutes stretched into hours. She made tea she didn't drink, started reading a book only to realize she'd read the same paragraph 4 times. Scout lay nearby, lifting his head at every small sound. The hum of the refrigerator, a car passing on the street, the distant call of a bird. Then, in the growing dusk, her phone's inbox pinged. Scout's head shot up, his ears forward, as if he knew this sound was different from all the others. Naomi's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat as she reached for her phone. One new message from Isaac Cohen. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, Scout now sitting fully alert beside her chair. The message was short, just 3 words that changed everything. Can we meet? The autumn morning felt crisp and clear as Naomi guided her SUV through town, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Scout sat in the passenger seat, occasionally pressing his nose against her arm as if saying, "It'll be okay." "I don't know why I'm so nervous," she said aloud, glancing at Scout. "He's family, right?" The cafe she'd chosen sat on a quiet corner, its red brick exterior warmed by morning sunlight. Wind chimes tinkled softly above the entrance, and potted mums added splashes of burgundy and gold to the sidewalk. She'd picked it because it was usually empty this time of day, perfect for a conversation that might stir up powerful emotions. Naomi parked and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing her dark hair with trembling fingers. Scout whined softly. I know. I'm stalling." She reached into the back seat for her canvas bag containing the journals, photographs, and carefully wrapped toy soldier. "Let's go, buddy." Inside, Naomi chose a corner table away from the windows. Scout settled at her feet, his steady presence helping to calm her racing heart. She ordered coffee she couldn't drink, instead, watching the door while arranging and rearranging the items she'd brought. At exactly 10 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. A tall man with silver hair stepped inside, pausing to let his eyes adjust to the dimmer light. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Though his hair had gone gray and lines creased his face, she recognized those eyes immediately, the same ones that had looked out from those old photographs, bright with curiosity and something like hope. Scout's tail thumped against the floor as Isaac's gaze found their table. He walked over slowly, as if approaching something fragile and precious. "Naomi?" His voice was soft, careful. She stood, her heart thundering. "Yes, you must be Isaac." They regarded each other for a long moment, both searching for familiar features, hints of shared history. Then Isaac's eyes fell to the items spread across the table, and his composure wavered. Please. Naomi gestured to the chair across from her. Sit down. Isaac sank into the chair, his attention fixed on the weathered journals. These are really from back then? From when? Yes. Naomi carefully opened the top journal to a dog-eared page. My uncle kept detailed records. He wrote about you and your mother almost every day. Isaac's hands trembled as he touched the aged paper. I never knew anything. My adoptive parents, wonderful people, they only knew I'd been placed with them through an agency. No background, no history, just a little boy who needed a home. Scout shifted closer to Isaac's chair, sensing his emotion. Isaac absently reached down to pat the dog's head, earning an approving tail wag. There's more, Naomi said gently. She unwrapped the toy soldier and placed it on the table between them. Isaac's eyes widened. His hand went to his mouth, stifling a small sound. I remember this. I remember holding it, but I thought it was just a dream or something I'd made up. Tears gathered in his eyes as he carefully lifted the toy soldier, turning it over in his hands. My mother gave this to me. She said it would protect me, keep me safe until we found somewhere we could be free. Naomi pulled out the photographs next, spreading them carefully on the table. Isaac's tears fell freely now as he looked at image after image, himself as a small boy, his mother's loving smile, moments of quiet joy, captured despite their circumstances. She was beautiful, he whispered, touching his mother's face in one of the photos. I had almost forgotten what she looked like. Sometimes I worried I'd made her up too. Scout rested his head on Isaac's knee, offering comfort. Isaac smiled through his tears, scratching behind the dog's ears. Your uncle, Isaac said, looking up at Naomi. He risked everything for us, didn't he? Naomi nodded, feeling tears in her own eyes. The journals talk about how brave your mother was, how determined to give you a better life. And how my uncle couldn't stand by and do nothing when you needed help. She showed him the letters his mother had written, the crayon drawings they'd found in the tin lunchbox, each item adding another piece to the puzzle of his past. Isaac absorbed everything with a mixture of wonder and grief, occasionally wiping his eyes or pausing to collect himself. All these years, he said softly, I've had this emptiness. This sense that part of my story was missing. I've built a good life. I have children, grandchildren even. But there was always this question mark about where I came from, who I was before. He reached across the table and clasped Naomi's hand, his grip warm and firm. I think you just gave me back the piece of my life I never knew was missing. The morning sun cast long shadows across the overgrown path as Naomi's SUV crunched up the gravel drive to the bunker. Scout sat in the back seat this time, while Isaac rode beside her, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Neither had spoken much during the drive. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air. As they parked, Isaac stayed in his seat for a long moment, staring at the concrete entrance, partially hidden by wild grass and morning glory vines. I didn't think it would affect me like this, he said softly, but I remember that door. In my dreams, sometimes, I'd see it. Naomi reached over and squeezed his hand. We can take as long as you need. Scout whined softly from the back seat, his tail thumping against the leather. Isaac managed a small smile. Your dog seems to think we should get moving. They climbed out into the crisp morning air. Scout bounded ahead, leading the way as he had that first day. Isaac walked slowly, taking in every detail, the slope of the hill, the weathered concrete, the rusty hinges on the heavy door. Mother would sing to me here, he said suddenly, stopping halfway down the path. When I was scared of the dark, she'd sing lullabies in Hebrew. I'd forgotten that until just now. Naomi watched as he reached out to touch the cold metal of the door, his fingers trembling slightly. She pulled out her flashlight and switched it on, illuminating the entrance. Ready? Isaac nodded, though his face was pale. Together, they descended the ladder into the musty darkness below. Scout followed, his nails clicking against the metal rungs. The beam of the flashlight swept across the space, revealing the metal shelves, the old crates, the marks of their previous searches. Isaac stood very still, breathing deeply. It's smaller than I remembered, he whispered, but also, exactly the same. The smell, that mix of earth and metal. I used to play right there. He pointed to a corner where Scout now sat, watching them intently. Mother would make up stories about brave knights and magical kingdoms, trying to help me forget we were hiding. Naomi led him to the section of wall where Scout had first discovered the hidden container. This is where we found the first journals, she explained, running her hand along the packed earth. Scout knew something was here. He wouldn't stop digging until we found it. Isaac knelt, pressing his palm against the wall. She used to tell me there were treasures hidden in the walls. I thought she was just making up stories to entertain me. His voice caught. But she was really hiding our history, wasn't she? Making sure some part of us would survive. Scout moved closer, nudging Isaac's other hand with his nose. Isaac scratched the dog's ears absently, lost in memory. I remember the night we left. It was raining. Someone was coming, looking for refugees they said weren't properly documented. Mother woke me up, and we ran through the woods. There were people helping us, but I was so scared. I kept crying for her, but she just kept telling me to be brave, to keep running. Naomi retrieved the lockbox they'd found, the one containing the war medals. There's something else we found, she said gently. A letter we haven't opened yet. It was underneath these medals. Isaac's hands shook as he took the weathered envelope. The paper had yellowed with age, but his mother's elegant handwriting was still clear. For my beloved Isaac. He broke the seal carefully, unfolding the pages inside. The letter was written in English, though there were phrases in Hebrew scattered throughout. Isaac began to read aloud, his voice trembling. My dearest son, if you are reading this, then you have found your way back to where our story began. I pray that you are safe, that you have lived the free life I dreamed of for you. There is so much I need to tell you, so much I hope you will understand. The night we fled, I knew they were coming for us. Your Uncle Matthews had warned me. They had identified us, and this time they wouldn't just deport us, they would separate us. I couldn't let that happen. So I made the hardest choice a mother could make. I arranged for you to be taken to safety, to people who could give you a new life, a clean slate. I stayed behind to lead them away from your trail. The Matthews family, they are not just the people who helped us survive. They are the ones who gave everything to protect us, who showed us what true family means. Isaac, my brave boy, I need you to know, the Matthews are your true family, not by blood, but by the choices they made, the risks they took, the love they showed when we had nothing else. Whatever life you have built, whatever name you now carry, know that you belong to two families, the one that bore you, and the one that saved you. Isaac's voice broke. He couldn't continue reading. Naomi took the letter gently, finishing the last. I don't know if I survived that night. But if you're reading this, then I succeeded in what mattered most. You lived. You grew up. You found your way back to the truth, and to the family that helped write our story. With all my love, for all time, Mother. The bunker fell silent, except for the sound of Isaac's quiet sobs. Naomi moved closer, putting her arm around his shoulders. He leaned into her embrace, his tears falling onto the letter he still clutched. She sacrificed everything, he whispered. All this time, I thought she'd abandoned me, but she saved me. She loved me enough to let me go. Scout pressed against their legs, offering his own form of comfort. Through his tears, Isaac managed a weak smile. And your uncle, he knew. He kept all this safe, made sure someday I'd find my way back. They sat together in the dim light, letting the weight of the truth settle around them. After a while, Isaac carefully folded the letter and slipped it back into its envelope. I spent years angry at this place, he said quietly. In my fragments of memory, it was a prison. But it wasn't, was it? It was a sanctuary, a place where people risked everything to protect each other. Naomi helped him to his feet. Ready to go back up? Isaac nodded, taking one last look around the bunker. Scout led the way to the ladder, his tail held high as if he knew his job was finally complete. As they emerged into the evening light, Isaac paused at the entrance. The setting sun painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, making the old concrete glow warm and alive. This isn't a tomb anymore, he whispered, his voice full of wonder and peace. It's home. The late summer breeze rustled through the newly planted flowers around the bunker entrance. Naomi stepped back, admiring how different the hillside looked after weeks of careful restoration. Where weeds and rust had once dominated, there were now neat garden beds filled with resilient perennials, their purple and yellow blooms brightening the concrete facade. Inside, the transformation was even more striking. Fresh paint covered the walls, and proper lighting illuminated carefully arranged displays. Framed photographs told the story of survival and sacrifice. Net, her uncle's stern but kind face, Isaac's mother's gentle smile, and little Isaac himself clutching his toy soldier. Brass plaques beneath each image detailed their roles in this remarkable story. Grandpa, is that really you? A small voice echoed through the space as Isaac's grandchildren, 7-year-old Sarah and 9-year-old David, pressed their faces close to one of the photos. Isaac knelt beside them, his hand resting on Sarah's shoulder. Yes, that's me when I was just a little older than you, he said softly. And that beautiful woman next to me? That's your great-grandmother. The children stared in wonder at the image, trying to reconcile their silver-haired grandfather with the small boy in the photograph. David reached out to touch the plaque beneath it. She was really brave, wasn't she? The bravest, Naomi answered, coming to stand beside them. Scout padded along at her heels, his gray muzzle showing his age but his tail still wagging steadily. As she watched Isaac with his grandchildren, Naomi felt a warmth spread through her chest. Number 3, so different from the emptiness that had plagued her since her divorce 2 years ago. Back then, she'd felt untethered, as if she had no real connection to anyone or anything. Now, standing in this place that had once seemed worthless, She understood she was part of something larger than herself. The children ran outside to play in the late afternoon sun, their laughter carrying down the hillside. Naomi and Isaac followed, settling on a newly installed bench near the entrance. "Thank you," Isaac said quietly, watching his grandchildren chase each other through the grass. "For making this place beautiful instead of frightening, for helping me give my family their history back." Naomi squeezed his hand. "Your mother and my uncle gave us both a legacy worth preserving." As the sun began to set, they gathered together at the bunker entrance. Naomi, Scout, Isaac, his children, and grandchildren. Fresh flowers rested against the wall, their sweet fragrance mixing with the evening air. Naomi looked at the faces around her, each one illuminated by the golden light, and felt profound gratitude. "What looked worthless," she said softly, "held the most priceless truth." If today's story echoed in your heart, I hope you'll stick around. Subscribe, and I'll be here again tomorrow with another story that speaks softly but stays deeply.